Humanity has always looked to the sky with the same silent question: are we alone? For centuries, telescopes scanned galaxies, probes crossed the solar system, signals were sent into the void, and the universe answered with silence. That silence became certainty. Certainty that Earth was special, or perhaps forgotten. Elias believed that, like everyone else, to him, the universe was too vast, too cold, too empty to care about humanity. His world was much smaller. A mining space station, slowly orbiting a nameless planet, far enough from Earth to make any sense of longing. Hurt. Every day was the same. Waking up to the artificial sound of gravity, stabilizing, walking through metal corridors lit by lights that were far too white, working long hours, extracting resources from a dead planet that would never support life. It's strange to think about it now, but Elias thought that routine was safe. While billions of people on Earth lived their lives, out there in space, everything felt predictable, controlled, silent, a comfortable silence. During breaks, he would stare at the stars through the station's panoramic windows. Distant dots. Motionless, indifferent, no unknown ships, no strange signals, no threats. Scientific reports were clear. No intelligent civilizations detected. No answers. No proof that anyone was watching. What Elias didn't know was that this silence wasn't natural. It wasn't the absence of life. It was concealment. Earth was not alone. It was hidden, isolated by technologies humanity couldn't even dream of understanding. Protected, or perhaps preserved, by forces that observed every human step from afar. And while Elias walked through the station corridors, complaining about long shifts and counting the days until he could go home, he had no idea that his peaceful routine existed only because someone, somewhere in the cosmos, had decided that humans were not ready yet, but that isolation was about to end. And when it did, the entire universe would realize that humanity's silence never meant weakness, it meant waiting. Space had always been synonymous with emptiness. Dark, still predictable. Until the moment it broke. Elias was in the station's outer sector when the stars began to tremble. It wasn't an explosion, it wasn't an impact, it was as if reality itself were being pulled backward by invisible hands. For a few seconds, no one understood what was happening. Sensors became visibly confused. Star maps no longer matched what eyes could see. The sky, once stable, now seemed unstable. Then it happened. A tear of energy appeared in the void, slowly opening like a luminous wound in space. The light didn't come from a star, it came from inside the tear itself. Alarms began to sound, first hesitant, then desperate. Red lights flooded the corridors. Emergency protocols activated without clear explanation. Elias approached one of the panoramic windows, and what he saw made his body freeze. From the tear in space, something began to emerge. It wasn't a ship. It was far too large for that. Colossal structures crossed the portal, with impossible shapes, as if designed by a mind that followed no human logic. Living surfaces, pulsating mechanical parts, energy flowing like blood. And then more tiers opened. 1, 2, dozens. The space around the station ceased to be a starry sky and became a battlefield waiting to be born. The station's communications went insane. Calls from Earth, fragmented, messages, screams, contradictory orders. No one knew who was arriving. They only knew one thing: they were not human. Elias felt something he had never felt up there before. Real fear. Not the fear of technical failure or accidents, but the primal fear of being observed by something far greater. When the first vessel completed its passage through the portal, sensors finally registered an automatic designation, translated by the station's ancient systems. Origin unidentified. Technology beyond human standard. At that instant, humanity's greatest certainty died. The universe was not empty, it never had been, and the tear in space was not an invitation, it was a warning. Earth's isolation had been broken, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could close that portal again. The first shot wasn't heard, it was felt. Space warped for an instant, as if the universe itself had held its breath. And then, darkness was split by a beam of energy that crossed the void in absolute silence. The entire station shook. Panels exploded. Systems failed. Gravity fluctuated. Elias was thrown against a wall as lights went out around him. Through the windows, the impossible unfolded. The ships that had crossed the portals weren't just arriving, they were attacking, on the other side of space. New rifts opened in response. From them emerged entirely different fleets, more elegant, more luminous, almost ethereal. Two forces collided in the void. Energy beams crossed space like cosmic lightning. Silent explosions erased distant stars for brief seconds. Entire ships were disintegrated. Before completing a single maneuver, there was no human formation, no comprehensible strategy. This wasn't a conventional battle. It was a war fought on scales the human mind was never meant to understand. The mining station was nothing more than a grain of dust in the middle of it. Communications picked up disconnected fragments, unknown languages, frequencies that caused physical pain when heard, transmissions that sounded more like divine decrees than military commands. Elias realized, with a knot in his stomach, that no one was fighting for humanity. Earth was not the objective, it was collateral damage. One of the colossal ships slowly rotated, aligning something like a glowing core toward the dead planet near the station. A shot was fired. The planet simply cracked. It didn't explode. It was divided into perfect pieces, as if dismantled by an invisible hand. The psychological impact was immediate. If they could do that to a planet, what would they do to Earth? The station entered full evacuation. Escape pods launched in every direction, like seeds thrown randomly into space. Elias ran through corridors as the distant sound of explosions echoed through the metal hull. With every step, one certainty solidified in his mind: humanity had been discovered, and the universe was not interested in negotiation. The galactic war had begun, and humans were not ready for it. Amid the chaos, Elias began to notice a pattern. Among all those monstrous ships, there was one specific type that never retreated, never dodged, never hesitated. They were the first ones to cross the portals. Biomechanical structures advanced in straight lines, ignoring losses, passing through explosions as if they were irrelevant. Each ship seemed alive, but alive in the wrong way. The station's systems finally managed to translate fragments of enemy transmissions. They weren't messages, they were calculations. Probabilities. Extinction rates, efficiency of extermination. The name appeared on monitors moments before. One of the station's sectors was vaporized. Zyphar, a collective consciousness, not individuals, not leaders, a race that had replaced emotion with absolute logic. To the Zyphar, organic life was a flaw in the universe, chaotic, unpredictable, inefficient, that needed to be corrected. Zyphar ships didn't attack military targets. They attacked sources of life, habitable planets, stations with humans, civilian colonies. Everything was reduced to raw material. Elias watched, helpless, as a Zyphar fleet surrounded a nearby station. Mechanical arms extended from the ships, attaching to the hull like parasites. In seconds, the entire structure was dismantled, absorbed, reused. Nothing was wasted. The machines learned in real time. Every wrong shot was corrected in the next. Every escape attempt became a predictable pattern. There was no rage. No hatred. Only execution. One of the records captured by the station described the conclusion about humanity: organic species, primary level, potential for future disorder, elimination recommended. Elias felt the weight of those words more than any explosion. To them, humans weren't enemies, they were a statistical error, while the luminous forces on the other side of the conflict tried to contain the machine's advance. Zyphar continued forward, indifferent to losses, adapting every second. The war wasn't about conquest, it was about purification. And in that moment, Elias understood something terrifying. If the Zyphar won, there would be no one left to tell the story. If the Zyphar were the cold terror of absolute logic, the Aurelians were something far harder to understand. They didn't arrive destroying, they appeared. Between shots and explosions, space itself began to glow, not like fire, but like auroras forming in the void. Aurelian ships had no solid hulls. They were structures of condensed light, impossible geometric forms, linked by pulsating energy currents. They moved without propulsion, as if space itself made way for them. When an Aurelian appeared, the surrounding chaos diminished. Zyphar attacks simply failed. Energy beams were absorbed, deflected, or dissolved before reaching their targets. But this protection wasn't mercy. The transmissions captured from the Aurelian fleet didn't sound like military orders. They sounded like judgments. They spoke of the universe as a fragile balance, of civilizations as variables, of entire species as experiments that could be terminated. The didn't want to destroy everything, they wanted to control it. For them, war wasn't about victory. It was about maintaining cosmic order, even if that meant erasing entire worlds. And then, for the first time, the word humanity appeared in their transmissions, not as an immediate target, but as an uncertainty. The Aurelians knew about Earth. They always had. They had observed humans for generations, analyzing wars, art, fear, love, contradictions. They saw a species capable of creating and destroying with the same intensity. That frightened them, because humans didn't follow fixed patterns. They weren't fully logical nor fully predictable like the ancient races of the cosmos. One record was partially translated before the system failed. Emotional species, high variability, potential to disrupt universal balance. To the humanity wasn't an error, it was a risk, and that made everything worse. While containing the machine's advance, the Aurelians also ensured that no emerging race and humans interfered with the war's destiny before the correct moment. They didn't protect Earth out of kindness. They protected it out of convenience. Elias watched it all without fully understanding, but a feeling began to grow inside him. If the Zyphar represented total extinction, and the Aurelians represented absolute control, then there was no safe side for humanity. The galactic war had no heroes, and at some point, the Aurelians would also have to decide whether humans deserved to exist, while empires collided in the void. Elias just tried to keep breathing. The station no longer felt real. Twisted corridors, sealed doors, smoke leaking from burned panels. Gravity failed for entire seconds, slamming people into the ceiling before pulling them back down. Screams echoed through communicators. Calls for help unanswered, names called, and never answered. Elias ran without a plan. There was no training for this. No protocol for surviving a war between gods and machines. He stumbled over a body floating in the corridor, eyes open, frozen and vacuumed. A coworker, a friend, someone he had shared long shifts and pointless conversations with about going back to Earth. That's when it hit him. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a station failure. It was the end of the world, just too far away for anyone on Earth to notice. Emergency screens flashed useless messages. Evacuation recommended. Survival probability minimal. Elias felt something worse than fear. He felt insignificant. While ancient races decided the fate of the universe, he was nothing more than a fragile human, trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. At one observation window he stopped for a moment. Outside, the spectacle continued. Zyphar ships advanced like an inevitable tide. Aurelian luminous forms bent space around them, reshaping the battle. End in the middle of it all. The station was being ignored, not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't worth the effort. That realization hurt more than any explosion. Elias clenched his fists, not in anger. In despair. He didn't want to be a hero, didn't want to change the fate of the galaxy. He just wanted to go home. But home no longer existed the way he remembered it. When the station's structure began to collapse, a final warning echoed through failing speakers. Remaining escape pods. Old sector, limited access. Old sector, a part of the station no one used anymore. Obsolete technology. Forgotten systems. Elias took a deep breath and ran in that direction, unaware that this choice, small, desperate, human, was exactly what the universe had been waiting for. The old sector felt forgotten by time. Lights barely worked, flickering in yellowish tones. The air was colder, heavier. As if no one had breathed there for years. Elias forced a door open manually, muscles burning as the station shook around him. On the other side he found a small abandoned hangar, and something that made no sense at all. An escape pod. Too old to be there. No official identification. No records in the station's maps. It didn't look human. The metal bore strange markings, spiral symbols, as if someone had tried to imitate technology, without truly understanding it, and even powered down. The pod seemed to watch him. The station alert echoed again, barely audible. Imminent structural failure. Elias had no choice. As he approached, the pod reacted. Dormant runes began to glow. The hull vibrated not like a machine, but like something waking from a long sleep. The door opened on its own. Before he could think, the interior molded itself to his body, fitting as if it had been made for a human, or perhaps, for him. The seal closed instantly. Hermetic, silent, outside, the station began to tear apart. Then the voice appeared. It didn't come from speakers. It didn't come from anywhere. It emerged inside Elias's mind. Ancient, deep, heavy with echoes. Bearer identified. Compatibility confirmed. Elias tried to scream. To move, his body didn't respond, ignoring all known escape routes. Without countdown or warning, the pod performed a jump no human system could calculate. Space folded. Stars stretched. And the universe disappeared. In the final instant before the jump, Elias felt something strange. Not fear. Purpose. As consciousness faded, the voice spoke again. You were not chosen for being the strongest, nor the smartest, but for being human. And in that moment, as the pod vanished from the battlefield, something ancient awakened. Something that had failed once, and now bet everything on the only variable it could never predict. Humanity. Elias woke up in silence, not the silence of space, but a conscious silence. He didn't feel the weight of his body, nor the passage of time. He was in a place that wasn't a place, a mental space created by the pod itself. Before him, a presence began to form. It had no face, no fixed shape. It was made of memories, echoes of ancient voices, fragments of extinct civilizations. The voice returned, clearer now. You wonder why your species was hidden. Elias hadn't even realized he had thought that. Presence showed images, galaxies, being born, races rising and falling, advanced civilizations going to war. Always the same way. All followed patterns. Extreme logic, like the Zyphar. Absolute order, like the Aurelians. Always predictable, always controllable, and always defeated. Then the image changed. Earth appeared. Primitive, violent, contradictory. Humans warring with each other, but also creating art, music, stories, destroying, and then trying to rebuild. Your species does not evolve in a straight line, the entity said. You break cycles. The entity explained that, in an ancient era, a civilization tried to end the galactic war using pure logic. It failed. Then tried absolute control. Failed again. The problem was never power, it was predictability. Humans were different, driven by emotion, doubt, hope, fear, and precisely because of that, they made decisions no cosmic intelligence could anticipate. That made humanity dangerous, and valuable. That's why Earth was isolated, wrapped in layers of concealment, erased from star maps, protected even from the Aurelians, not to be spared, but to mature. The entity was direct. You are not the first human we observed, but you are the first to arrive here at the right moment. Elias felt the weight of the revelation. All of human history was not chance, it was waiting. The entity revealed the final truth. The pod was not a weapon, it was a test, a last resort created by an extinct civilization that believed only an unpredictable mind could change the course of the war. And now, that legacy was bound to Elias. You carry the choice the universe fears. To save the balance, or break it forever. When silence returned, Elias realized something frightening. The secret wasn't that humanity was hidden. The secret was that, when the universe finally encountered humans, nothing would be prepared for what they could become. At first, the power felt distant. Elias still felt human, confused, afraid, small before everything, but the pod was not dormant, it responded. When Elias's consciousness returned to his physical body, space around him felt different, slower, clearer, as if the universe were being filtered through another layer of perception. The entity explained the cost, but didn't ask permission. Every time Elias accessed the ancient technology, something inside him changed. Not visibly, but deeply. He began to predict movements before they happened. To feel probabilities instead of emotions. 2. Understand patterns no human should comprehend. In his first confrontation, he saved a civilian ship without touching it. He bent space around it, diverting a Zyphar attack. It worked, and it terrified him. Because for a brief moment, he felt nothing, no relief, no joy, only efficiency. The entity was clear. Power requires space, and it occupies the space of who you are. Elias began to notice small losses, childhood memories blurred. The faces of loved ones appeared incomplete. Simple feelings, like longing and guilt, felt distant. Meanwhile, the universe reacted. The Zyphar detected him as a statistical anomaly, something that broke perfect predictions. The Aurelians watched with renewed attention, no longer curiosity, but potential threat. Elias became a target, not for who he was, but for what he was becoming. With every choice made using the pod, the dilemma grew: use the power and lose himself, or preserve his humanity and watch the universe burn. Some nights, Elias wondered if he was still the same person who worked on a mining station, if he still belonged to Earth, or if he had crossed a point of no return. The entity offered no comfort, only a reminder. The universe does not need another god, it needs someone who knows when not to use power. Elias realized, with a tightness in his chest, that the greatest battle of the galactic war was not against machines or beings of light, it was against the silent transformation within himself, and that he could lose without anyone ever noticing. The war didn't wait for Elias to be ready. The Zyphar advanced like an equation, impossible to stop. The Aurelians repositioned their fleets, preparing what they called the final adjustment of balance. 2 solutions, 2 different extinctions, and in between, a human, forced to choose. The entity showed fragments of the future. If Elias unleashed the pod's full power, the Zyphar would be eliminated in a single cosmic event, but the impact would destroy entire systems. Millions of lives would vanish as well. If he allowed the Aurelians to take control, the war would end, but the universe would enter an era of eternal surveillance, entire civilizations living under constant judgment. There was no clean victory. The pod awaited a command, not a logical order, a decision. Elias remembered. Earth. Not governments. Not technology. He remembered ordinary people, simple routines, mistakes, laughter, fear, and hope. He remembered himself. Before all of this, then he did something no projection predicted. He refused both options. Instead of unleashing maximum power, Elias used the pod to send a signal. Not an attack, not a threat, a call, a pulse that crossed the battlefield and reached every consciousness connected to the war. Zyphar. Aurelians. Other races hidden in the shadows. Within the pulse, there was no pure logic. No absolute control. There was memory. Contradiction. Emotion. There was humanity. For an instant, the universe hesitated. The machines didn't know how to respond. The Aurelians couldn't classify the event, and in that brief interval, something changed. The war didn't end, but it stopped. Elias felt the cost. Immediately his body collapsed. His mind nearly shattered, but he smiled, because, for the first time, the choice wasn't dictated by power, but by who he still was. The entity spoke, almost in respect. You did what no civilization has done before. You created a third possibility. As Elias vanished into hyperspace, recovering from collapse, one truth became clear. Humanity was not the end of the galactic war. It was the beginning of something new, and this was only the first decision. If you want to continue this story, discover the consequences of this choice, and understand why the universe now watches Earth closely, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and get ready, because in the next chapter, the war will demand its price.